and welcome Lamakarma.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming. So we're going to begin just with a little chanting, refuge, and homage to the three jewels, and then I'll lead some gentle movement and meditation, and then we'll start the topic for today. Yeah. So one moment while I share the screen. Okay, so we'll just do this in Sanskrit. 3 times each section. O Namo Buddhaya Gurave Namo Dharmaya Tayine Namo Samgaya Mahate Dribyovi Satatam Namaha O Namo Buddhaya Gurube Namo Dharmaya Tayine Namo Samgaya Mahate Dribyobi Satatam Namaha O Namo Buddhaya Gurave Namo Dharmaya Tayine Namo Samgaya Mahate Tribyobi Satatam Namaha Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami Sangham Sharanam Gacchami Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami Sangham Sharanam Gacchami Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami Sangham Sharanam Gacchami O Dada Sinchin Tanji Lotusu Drawer Jinji Lotusu Cholondu Drawer Jinji Lotusu Lontrumba Sour Jinji Lotusu Trumba Yeshisu Drawer Jinji Lotusu Lai Kedan Ludan Noringe Trumam Dada Mi Kedandan Drua Kundi Jaki Chisampa Tanji Kedu Daki Churchindu Tamba Lai Lindinshin Sundan Demin Midi Joy Jinsen Kanjin Kamabala Suwade Jisun Jawi Jisu Kamabe Raja Junle Jula Wanjurwa Tai Sita Raja Chirachin Riba Junanana Suwade Jamba Juna Biro Nambaju Jase Lanchi Yanchi Jusamba Kabab Duna Pima Doyan Lin Chayan Chense Wampo Suwade Kadar Lizin Biro Nambaju Sojin Nandi Shindan Lonsote Rimi Tenzin Yenten Chansote Lojo Tai Shabla Suwade Omen Chuchi Inchi Porane Dusun Sanji Kunji Noni Ransun Choku Nosun Tonze Be Sawe Lama Shala Suwade. Okay, let's begin. Just taking a comfortable seat. Give yourself a little bit of room to move and bend around you if you need. So let's begin with 3 complete breaths. And in order to breathe completely, discover the breath in the abdomen, in the chest, and in the upper chest. So exhaling completely, breathing in with the belly, filling and then filling the chest, filling all the way up into the upper chest, and then exhaling all the way down, really forcing all of the breath out at the end of the exhalation. Again, breathing in, really exploring the full capacity of breath, and expelling all the way down, from the top down. One last time. And breathing naturally. I'm going to do some gentle movements, integrating the breath in the body. So breathing in. As we breathe out, bringing the left shoulder to the right knee, just in the direction of the right knee, bending as you can, twisting, exhaling. Breathing in, coming back to center. And exhaling to the other side, right shoulder to the left knee. Breathing in and out at your own rhythm. Breathing into the lower belly, filling all the way up into the chest. Exhaling from the chest, all the way down into the lower belly. Three times to each side. And then resting in the starting position. As you rest, breathing in and sensing activation. Feeling what in the body has come alive or is sore, spacious. As you breathe out, allowing the breath to carry sensation and disperse it throughout the body. Next movement with our hands on our hips, breathing in. Exhaling and twisting the spine. Breathing in, coming back to center. And exhaling, twisting to the other side. Again, at your own pace. Breathing in and out. Again, resting, allowing the breath to settle and spread throughout the whole body. Whatever sensations have been awakened, maybe in the center of the chest or the belly, wherever you have a palpable sense of presence. Breathing in, mixing the breath with that sense. As you breathe out, just relaxing and spreading, dispersing. Just inviting awakeness throughout the body. Okay, and the next movement, hands on the hips, breathing in. And exhaling, bending to the side. Breathing in, coming to center, and exhaling to the other side. Three times to each side. And as we rest and disperse, and come into more of a full body awareness. Feel what it's like to ride the out-breath and slightly soften the boundary of the body. You can imagine breathing out through all of the pores of the skin. Or maybe just feeling the envelope become a little bit more permeable. Okay, next movement with our hands on our knees. Breathing in and arching back. Exhaling and rolling forward, curling forward, tucking the chin, drawing the belly back towards the spine. Exhaling completely. Three times back and forth. As we settle once again, moving from movement to rest. Like a drop of ink in water. Just allowing the felt sense of the body just starts to spread and extend all around you, beyond you. You can continue to use the out-breath, riding the out-breath, relaxing and opening. And if your eyes have been closed, experiment with what it's like to gently open them. And as you breathe out through the eyes, relaxing the visual field. As you breathe out and open the visual field, allow it to mix with the openness of the body. So that we are feeling what we see. And we are seeing what we feel. Even in a way behind us. What is it like to breathe out and extend the felt sense behind? And to tune into the eyes in the back of your head. That sense of being seen from behind. The point here is just to come to a place that is at ease. One that is impartial. Not needing to focus on this as opposed to that. Yet relaxed enough that everything appears equally, clearly, without obstruction. If you find that you are becoming distracted, or that anything inside or outside is particularly sticky, come back to the breath in the body. Ride the breath. Release and open. See if you can sense this orientation that we habitually identify with, of looking outward, of looking outside. In order to see this orientation, we can intensify it. For instance, in the visual field, picking a discrete object, focusing on it now intensely. Not letting our mind stray for even an instant, with a sense of mortal peril, really focusing. Solidifying it, externalizing it, and then releasing it. Opening again. Allowing the visual field to be received. Instead of apprehended. Received impartially. Again, just relax and openness. And if you need more support, coming back to the breath and the body. Exhaling, releasing and opening through the body, through the eyes, through the ears. Now picking a persistent auditory phenomenon. Can you hear something that is steady? Focus upon it. Triangulate. Locate. Try to catch every moment of the resonance without a single second of distraction. Notice how this feels in the body to focus in this way. And again, release. Feel what it's like to receive sound impartially. So we have some sense of this habit of looking outside, sensing externally. We have some sense of the alternative as we release. Now we can do two things. We can either continue to release, to relax, and to open. Or we can turn back and look at the one who is looking. And turning back and just for a moment pulling the rug out. We can listen. We can turn back and ask who is listening. And then relax. Not needing to find, but simply resting in the gap, in the momentary groundlessness of that turning about. One way to unfold that first way of releasing, opening, relaxing is through trust. Try to explore now what it's like to fundamentally trust our experience. That whatever is arising moment to moment is just as it is, with no need for it to become something more, or for anything needing to be taken away. Trusting not only that what is arising need not be more nor less, but also that it is a fundamental reflection of our own mind. That whatever is arising is trustworthy. Because it is our own radiance. So whatever happens, if we are distracted, if we have irritation, or if we have bliss, there's no need to control in any way. There's no need to create a posture. Try to connect with this sense of trust. The sense of trust touches the heart deeply. The feeling of it can only almost be theological. If we can surrender very deeply, there is a kind of rapture that arises in that release. That may come and go, but trust remains. Okay. So even just a brief moment of connecting with what I'm referring to there as trust can be really helpful. And we'll explore that more as we when we open up for questions and responses. Yeah. So all of this is to connect with the topic for today, which is karma, and this part of up, down, and all around. I guess we'll get to that in a minute. I think it's evocative of a children's song. I forget which one. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But this all actually started with like some of these talks, these natural dharma talks. All this started with part of the book group that I sometimes facilitate at the grade school that my daughter goes to, the middle way school, which is a project of Zonsa Chense Rinpoche. And one of those book groups, we read a book called Zen Shorts, which is a picture book, and it has a number of parables in it. And so we talked about the origin of all of those. But one of the parables within that book is actually something that is supposedly from the Taoist tradition, but it seems to pop up everywhere. And I first encountered it in a book called The Snow Lion's Turquoise Mane, which is a compilation of a bunch of folk tales and Buddhist stories. And the story goes like this, where there's a farmer, a very poor farmer, and he has a horse. And one day the horse runs away. And all of his neighbors try to support him and just say, we're really sorry that happened. It must be terrible. And he says something gnomic like, maybe, or we'll see, or something like that. And then a day later, the horse returns and brings with it 3 other wild horses. And then everyone's like, oh wow, how amazing. This is, not only did you get your horse back, now you have 3 more. Because, horses are wealth. So, and then again, he responds, well, maybe, we'll see. Then, his son tries to break one of the horses, starts riding it. And the horse throws his son, the farmer's son, and he breaks his leg. And then everyone's like, that's terrible. What terrible circumstance, how this thing is unfolding. And again, he's like, we'll see, maybe. And then, a few weeks later, the army rolls through, and they're conscripting villagers for the army to fight in a war. And because his son has a broken leg, they pass him over. And sometimes the story ends there, and it's sort of, how amazing, how good. But then we always know that there's maybe something else going on, right? So there's these kind of ups and downs And in the book, it's really funny. So his son, they're all rabbits, and his son is like has his broken leg up on this duvet, and he's watching TV, and the father's just kind of like wondering what's going to happen next. Anyway, so we'll see, right? Point being here that it's a good introduction to the topic of karma, where things are always going up and down, and that within the ups there are seeds of the dissolution, things falling apart, and within the nadir, the bottom of things, there's the seed of it becoming something more positive, and that this process goes on and on, up and down, right? And from a Buddhist point of view, it's not just up and down, but it's all around. In other words, it's a cycle that positive, we'll just say karma, circumstances, have within them the seed of something negative, because those positive circumstances are impermanent and will fall apart. And not only in the falling apart there is suffering, but then in the result of that, it may just fall apart and something positive comes out of it. It need not go, be oscillating in that way. It can go in any direction, but that's more just an illustration of how things can change, right? But point being that within every circumstance there is a seed of its opposite, and that things are constantly changing, and therefore, and because they're subject to change, the way that we're relating to them creates this kind of momentum where we're always kind of scrambling. We're always trying to make up for the ground that is being lost, because on some level things are slipping away. There's a forward momentum, and this is called the cycle of becoming. In fundamental Buddhism, we talk about the 12 nidanas, pratitya samutpada, the links of interdependent or dependent origination. All the ways in which, all the factors through which existence perpetuates itself. And so this talk, I was encouraged by Hildur to have a follow-up. So today we talk about karma, and then in a few weeks we'll talk about rebirth, because they're really very closely linked. So this, how we're being propelled forward, it's not just in this life, moving from circumstance to circumstance, trying to make up our ground, trying to get our feet under ourselves, even though everything is shifting and changing. But then that propels us into further states of becoming, further embodiments, and further enworldments, bodies and worlds that we propel ourselves into through this act of karmic creation. So from a Buddhist point of view, that's important to understand. And even within something like Stoic, Greek philosophy, you have a lot of really good tips, basically, wisdom to help navigate that state of affairs without necessarily pointing to anything beyond this life, just showing how having an equanimous mind, a mind also that is not dominated by the passions, by craving, a mind that is able to stay with an even keel through changing circumstances, leads to fulfillment, leads to greater capacity to actualize oneself, and to one's gifts, and to act in the world, and so forth. So even within mundane philosophy, there is this understanding of the way that circumstance unfolds, and that's really important. And the more that we can resource that and be honest about that, the more temporary happiness we can secure, you might say. And also the more then we can look beyond this life to to see that it's not going to end, right? That in and of itself it will continue to perpetuate itself. This unfolding of karma, this forward momentum, this unfolding and rolling, you might say, the ups and downs continue to cycle around. So we can see that, and then we can reflect, well, what is the alternative, right? And there we have a variety of different answers, what the alternative is. With what we just did in the meditation, tried to illustrate this through our own experience. In other words, trying to get at the level of karma, of the way in which we are habitually projecting, perceiving the reflection of that projection, and then projecting again on the basis of that reflection. So there's a projection, reflection, and we just keep bouncing back and forth between the inner and the outer, and trying to show in those exercises, for instance, with a visual phenomena, what is it like to intensify that situation? So when we apprehend an object with a very fixed and intense mind, the mind that fixates becomes more solid. The object that is fixated upon becomes more real. The separation between the one who perceives and the thing that is seen becomes more pronounced. And in that, we are intensifying this whole rebound experience. It's like we feel it and it starts to hurt our head, and then we feel it more, and it's like you can start to feel how that's unfolding moment to moment in the way that we're projecting, fixating, and then being in that closed loop. And then suddenly when we can release that, the alternative is there's a little bit more breathing room. There's a little bit more space of possibility. It's not so circumscribed and fixed. It's not so necessary, less solid. Yet the clarity of things doesn't dissipate, and it actually, things become even more clear in a certain way. So this is one of the ways that we can talk about the alternative to the habitual way of being in karma. To talk about it in another way, and this is the direction that I was heading after that in terms of trust, where it's not just that things are up and down. It's that the ups and downs are profoundly, it's tricky to say personal, but they're appropriate. It's not just random ups and downs, in other words. It's not just that we are in a sea of circumstance and we're like this little boat bobbing up and down on the waves, doing our best to have a stiff upper lip and a stoic smile, whatever it might be, right? It's not, and then sort of working to a nirvana in which we're not going to be hassled by that as much, because we're going to exhaust the causes of all of this karma. That's one way of doing it, but it's a little bit heavy-handed. When we relate with the ups and downs, when we relate with how our experience unfolds, we can also, probably not in the beginning as much, but as we practice, and practice includes shila, so ethics. It includes concentration, samadhi, and it includes prajna, so wisdom. All of these, but any of them, even if we're just leading an ethical life, the more we practice, let alone if we're able to marry that ethical life with a stability of attention, depth of perception, the more we practice, the more things become trustworthy. That reality, what we know to be, our experience, the world, these big, very vague terms, but just what unfolds moment to moment and day to day, starts to show up in a way that it's not so much predictable, but it's not so much friendly always, but it's trustworthy. And of course, if we are, I know many of my family members are evangelical Christians, and they have a sense of what I'm sharing here now, and this is why I say it could, in the meditation, it can almost be theological, where in the extreme case, it's like the book of Job, where God and Satan have this sort of dialogue, and they put Job to the test, and then everything just gets ruined, and he stays the course because of his faith, kind of. That's sort of the extreme version. Or maybe you are, somewhat privileged, and you never really are tested that deeply, but you have some kind of faith, which does, in many ways, allow you to be open, basically, to your experience, positive and negative, and to offer, what is positive back to God in that sense, and what is negative, you own it and see it as a gift for you to work on something that you haven't developed fully to that point. Even within a theological framework, that's helpful. It allows you to be healthy and remain having a positive mind, being engaged, and so forth. So that's fine. But what I'm talking about here is that, but without any kind of transcendental anchor to the whole situation. It's that, but the trustworthiness is not dependent upon anything on the outside, but starts to point more and more to an intimacy with one's own awareness. So what that means is that as the ups and downs, which maybe in the beginning were more chaotic, were seemingly more random, you start to have a sense that, this, how many, you see this in romantic relationships, it's like I always pick the same partner or the opposite of that partner again and again. What's going on there? That's like a sort of funny example. Or you have a child and they sort of bring up all of the exact things that are just a total mess in your own psyche or whatever. They're this mirror, uncompromising mirror for you. Like, how does that happen? Or in our good friendships, people who really genuinely care about us, and especially spiritual friendships. The encounters that we have, we call it auspicious circumstances, the coincidences that occur in these relationships start to point at something that's a little bit more intimate than randomness would afford, right? And we start to have a sense that our reality is there, maybe you could say, to teach us something, is there as a, in a deeper sense, as a mirror. And as we continue to polish that mirror through ethics, through concentration, and through prajna, penetrating wisdom, it starts to become more true and more trustworthy, to the point at which ideally, we can really just surrender to that reality, which is not outside of us, nor is it, you can't really say it's within us. Maybe it's between, I don't know, but I hesitate to even say that. But yet there is something intelligible that is showing up there, and there is something trustworthy. And it's not a kind of depersonalized trust. It's like, okay, so we got rid of God, and now what? The trust is coming from, is it a kind of solipsism, like our own projection? Or is it just a trust that is kind of neutral, like the mirror of reality? It's just sort of there and we can start to trust it? Maybe. I mean, that's not so bad. But it can also become very, very personal and intimate, that the mirror of reality can show up in a way as a teacher, as an other that we can dialogue with. And if we're lucky, that dialogue can happen through the medium of an actual embodied teacher. It can happen through our relationship with, say, a deity like Tara or Chenrezig, if we resonate with that. It can happen in any number of ways, which again may appear. If you read any kind of text on Guru Yoga, you could just replace Guru or Lama with God, and it would read like any kind of theological text, basically. But yet there's an understanding of the nature of Tara, of the nature of the Guru. And if we don't necessarily have a connection with those kinds of methods, it still can be deeply personal. And as that relationship develops, then karma becomes something different. It's just the details of the book of our learning. It's just what is it that's showing up moment to moment that is reminding us and pointing us back at our own nature, our own unconditioned nature. And to really talk about this in depth, we don't have time, but we would have to go into like how does duality occur? What is the mistake that is made? How is that mistake reiterated? And then how is karma unfolding on the basis of that mistake, and so forth. But even without that kind of in-depth treatment, we can still sort of intuitively understand what's happening here. And then just as a conclusion, when we have that, when we start to touch that trust and that level, and we start to have a little bit more freedom from like the whiplash of being an embodied being, or just kind of being thrown around constantly by the universe, after a while, we can start to, things become a little bit more even. But then suddenly we're taking on the karma of others. Suddenly our boundaries are becoming large enough and permeable enough that we start to expose ourselves willingly, because of our altruistic intention, to the circumstances of others, and we willingly enter into them in order to bring wisdom. That is the compassion. It's the motivation to enter into the karmic situations of others, to help them have trust, basically. First of all, to ease the suffering so that things are manageable, and then on the basis of that to start to point to the situation beneath it, which is really just a lack of trust, a lack of recognition, and unfold it in that way. And then as we do that, karma is not ours, and it's really not even the karma of sentient beings. What happens is that, and this is on the level of fruition more of a Buddha, that our actions are creative actions in order to create, you might say, pure realms or mandalas or gardens of awakening, where through the investment of our intention and our actions, we create environments of harmony and of high reflective capacity that either through aesthetic beauty, through the natural enrichment of the elements of fire, water, air, and so forth, through the way in which wisdom becomes incarnated in an environment. As we act in that way, whoever comes into that environment is affected and is benefited. And the trustworthiness of that is more palpable. So it's like we can provide a refuge where beings can come out of the up and down and all around storm and come in momentarily to enjoy in peace and harmony, basically, enough so that then they can be receptive to the message of wisdom, that they can also have a little bit of breathing room to process their own karma in a way that's not overwhelming and in a way that doesn't contribute more to confusion, but actually starts to unwind it. And this is what pure realms are, in some sense. Most pure realms are just wisdom, celebrating wisdom. But places like the pure realm of Sukhavati in the west of Amitabha, that's something like I'm describing, or pure realms that exist. You see in the Vimalakirti Sutra, this, you might say, planet Earth is the unrecognized pure realm of Shakyamuni Buddha, and it's here. This blue dot floating in space is here as a place for beings to work themselves out, develop wisdom, and develop their capacity, and so forth. So, in other words, I'm just trying to trace this arc, from a very basic understanding of karma, where we need to sort of get our act together, basically, and not be so attached to the ups, and not so depressed by the downs, and moving from that to a place of trust, where we can dive into life with the kind of confidence that it's appropriate, and that it's not going to annihilate us, basically, but on the contrary is there as a extremely appropriate teaching, designed by no one, but unfolding from our own projection and reflection, and then that leading to a place where karma is no longer an issue, but rather enlightened activity. We say, so there's a word, trinli, in Tibetan versus lay, karma. The karma is exhausted, and then in its place arises enlightened activity. And enlightened activity is that which benefits beings in order to allow them to develop their own wisdom, right? So yeah, that's good for now. Anyone have anything with the meditation that we did, or any of what I was just sharing now? Any questions or contentions? Any basis of discussion? Yeah, Judy. Hi, Judy.
Hi, I'm really happy to see you back. I enjoyed all of your presentation. I just want to share something that's coincidental with what you're talking about in terms of trust that I also think comes into the exercise of intensifying experience and then releasing it. trust for me has been facilitated by the process of dropping of stories. And in dropping my biographical stories and dropping my brain chemistry reactions to those stories, I think a piece of habituation, of karma also that's attached to that gets dropped. And in its place is trust, because there's a very pleasing emptiness, a place to rest. It's like the smile on a baby's face when, their stomach's full and they're just sleeping, or on a puppy's face, same thing. And that conscious act of dropping stories has been my gateway into that. And it's helpful to hear you talk about what this evokes in troubled others. I think it is a living example that to the extent that the storyline of another doesn't get us hooked into, because that just starts the whole process over and over. I think when we model that lack of grasping and believing the story to the extent that our brain chemistry reacts, that's an act of kindness, and it's an act of compassion that's wordless, because my experience with people that are in turmoil is that they're going to argue and reject anything you say. So to not say, but simply model, it's helpful to my sanity in situations like that. I don't know if it helps the other people immediately or not, but it has been a pathway that feels easy for me to do, and I thank you for your gentleness around all this. It's been very accepting, and I think the children's stories have been immensely helpful to me also. So thank your children and the stories you tell them.
Great, thanks, Judy. Yeah, it's all well said. So in terms of story, there's not only the things that we do, which is our karma, actions, but then on top of that, we tell ourselves about what we do, what we will do, and we tell others about what we do, and then they affirm or reject our story about what we do. And regardless of whether they affirm it or they reject it, it substantiates our story, or obliterates it, or in either case, we're still stuck in story. Unless someone really cuts through it, or unless someone really affirms, a story of goodness in a way that stops our mind, right? So finding a way out of story through story can be helpful as well, if it's done well.
I see Jan has unmuted. Would you like to speak?
Yes. Are you going to post this somewhere? I need to hear it again.
Yeah, I'm recording it, but I think they record as well. Yeah.
But where will I be able to get it?
I'll just put it on YouTube, and I think all of the Natural Dharma stuff is archived on their website.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Everything that you said.
Thanks, Jan.
I have a situation that you know about, the other people in the group probably haven't heard, and I'm not going to tell a long story, but every single detail of what you were saying applies to this seemingly extremely abrupt, unforeseen, unpleasant uprooting of the geographical area in the immediate surrounds of our home. My reaction was to contact you and to plunge even more, much more into the teachings. But I hadn't really thought about how the karma or the setup that's creating for the future, how important it is, how one reacts to whatever the situation is. Mm-hmm. It's really, really important. So yes, and it has been a very rich teaching. It is being a very, I make it sound like it's over. It's not. It's our whole world. So really, it's like the world being turned upside down. Literally, with excavating the dirt and everything. It's like the earth here is being turned upside down. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, Dorothy?
Hi, thank you. I missed a lot of that, but I think it was really great. So I have to listen to the recording too. But I noticed that you said trust a lot, and sort of showed us different ways that trust can be developed. And can you say something more about what is the function of trust in comprehending or addressing karma?
How much
why was it in your you said?
Yeah, how much did you miss? When did you come in?
I was there for the whole story.
Oh, okay.
I came in like 5 minutes late.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so what is the role of trust in relationship to karma? Yeah?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is it like to have doubt? We doubt ourselves. That's one way of doubting. We doubt the teachings. We doubt that, in this case, the Dharma. We can have doubts that the Dharma is valid in different ways. We can say it's valid up to this point, but after this I can't really go along with it. Or we can say, well, the Dharma is valid, but I'm just not adequate to it, right? I just can't do it right now, that kind of thing, or it's beyond me, and therefore we doubt we just say reality, for lack of a better word. We doubt that our circumstances are workable, that the way that our life is and unfolds and the circumstances around it, we doubt that there is, it's hard to say, like, a reasonableness to it. We doubt that there is a rhyme or a reason, and that's okay, really, because there isn't any rhyme or reason necessarily, but we doubt that there isn't an alternative. I think that's the best way to put it. We doubt that there's anything other to do than make the best of it. We doubt that there's anything to do but do what we can, and that's very human, and that's fine. Like if we can meet life with that kind of courage, it's it's admirable, and I think there's a lot of, again, mundane philosophies and ways of being that give good advice, and also social support. Societies that can support people in approaching life to make the best of it, right? Friendships, everything. That's all fine. But what the Dharma offers is actually something much more profound. And whether we approach that profundity from the standpoint of what we would call like Shravakayana, like the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, where we see that there is an alternative, and the alternative is the cessation of suffering, and the cessation of karma, that is the cause of suffering. Or whether we see the alternative as a deep sense of trust in reality, which is another way of saying emptiness, another way of saying the profound meaning, the nedon, the actual. You can also say Buddha nature, although that it can be misinterpreted. That the alternative to doubting ourselves, the Dharma, and our situation is actually having a sense of our innermost nature, our mind. And that the more that we start to know our mind, the more karma is just the reflection of that. And if our knowledge is partial, then karma is seemingly more random. If our knowledge becomes more complete, karma becomes a very reliable mirror for aspects of ourselves that we can bring awareness to. And as that progresses, then it's what allows us to benefit others. It's a very way of benefiting others. So, I mean, the short answer is like it's the whole Dharma, like the relationship with trust and karma. I would say that the way I'm presenting it here, it's kind of like the Mahayana way of going beyond karma, of seeing the alternative to the bondage of karma. If that's helpful.
Great, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Fran.
Hi. I guess when I distilled some of it down, well, first it reminded me, some of what you were saying reminded me of the thing that's been going around for decades, the Desiderata poem. And I think one line is something like, things are happening as they should, basically. And that's what I hear in what you're saying, that whether it's this lifetime karma or prior lives, we're reaping what we sow. We're not aware of that for a while, or we don't like that. We don't want to think that for a while. But as we develop wisdom, we see that, as one of the scriptures says, or the 4 or 5 remembrances, our karma, we are heir to our karma. And at that point can bring wisdom to the situation, discernment, to gradually wear away and begin to see the alternatives. So anyway, and I really, when I think of karma, I don't necessarily believe in reincarnation or transmigration, but in the context of this life, and in fact, this moment, or this day, I am creating more karma. So I guess the other thing it reminds me of is just the dependent origination. Things are happening for a reason. Sometimes very complex reasons and interactions of phenomena. But I'm one element in those interactions, and I have some responsibility for that. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the aspect of sort of reaping what we sow, it can be tricky because it's not on the surface. It's localized. It's like an individual thing. Like our actions produce the results that we experience, and that's a helpful teaching in the beginning because it creates a sense of responsibility and also scrupulousness. And that's important, but as it deepens, we don't need to attribute it so narrowly, attribute our circumstances so narrowly to the effects of past actions, although in some way it's probably true, but rather it becomes a practice, rather than a metaphysical overarching structure. It's rather just an immediate reality where we wake up continually or refuse to in the midst of whatever is occurring because it's trustworthy. And we don't need to say who or where or why. Although, as we deepen that, we may have uncommon insight into the underlying causes of things, that are otherwise not perceptible, for sure. You can see deeply into things, and therefore change them for the better in other ways. But point being, just that at a certain point we can start to shift from a kind of metaphysical view of trying to understand the way things work to a more immediate view of just trusting our experience and working with it directly. Because we've already established responsibility, we've already become scrupulous in our action, we've already developed that basis. So we don't need to reiterate that so much, but it becomes much more of just opening the heart and being vulnerable to whatever is arising, and welcoming it. Right. Paula.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at this on a more external level right now because the attack that's going on by Putin is, and I don't know if politics are out, but I'm not trying to be political. My feelings about, the helplessness that I feel in what's going on it's very, how do I accept that, trust that, kind of like, oh, well, it's not my karma, but it is the karma of our reality right now that people are being, brutalized and bombed and, so it's really hard to be accepting of that, and not. I mean, I wish that I wasn't so far away because I have a home I would open up to these families. I would do something proactive if they weren't, thousands and thousands of miles away. If I could, do something, I would. But that's about all I could offer, and now I can't even offer that because of, the reality of the distance. So I just feel kind of it's been getting to me, even though all other aspects of my life have been really great lately. This in particular is a horror, and I'd like to know how this can be applied, to what we're talking about tonight. The karma, how is this a karmic happening or something? I don't know. I mean, I've thought about. I know you can say there's the yin and the yang. That there's always been wars, and it just frustrates me that we haven't evolved. There isn't a way that that is in existence at this point where this sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. And I anyway, what are your thoughts on that? I was wondering.
Yeah, so first of all, it's important to distinguish between personal karma and collective karma.
Right.
And what I've been talking about is more on the level of personal karma, that we can develop, a trustworthy attitude towards what we're encountering, right? And so for you, for us, in this moment, relative to what is happening in Ukraine, there are different channels of information that are coming to us, and that we can either be open to or ignore. There are relationships with family members and other people in our circles in which this arises, and we can be more or less open, more or less having an agenda, more or less opinionated in different ways that may or may not be helpful. So all of that is our own situation, right? And so that's the question. There is, how do we bring to bear our own wisdom and our own intelligence and our own capacity to care in the circumstances that we're being met with, and then how do we challenge ourselves to go beyond the limited spheres that we have, to be in contact with more sources of information, or just people, or in what ways do we see that we are closed down, basically, right? So that's all really important. But then on the level of collective karma, it's very tricky to say that this is trustworthy, right? I haven't even thought about that in some sense, but I think it is interesting if you talk about evolution, where something like this, if it had happened 100 years ago, would be a much different situation, and collective awareness of atrocity would have been much less, or completely ignored, or it would have been cast in a completely different light. But I think there is something to say about the way that this is unfolding that does point to a depth of awareness that I think collectively we have grown into in a certain way. And most people are not actually choosing to fight in this way, sort of being fooled into it in various ways. So it's tricky. You can get down into a rabbit hole very quickly, talking about that in that way. But I think, again, it's really something where we have to see what is our role, and what can our role be, and how can we challenge ourselves to go beyond our comfort zone or sphere of influence, and use this as an opportunity for deepening our capacity, and even if it's just for our own a spur for practice, that alone is something that we can do, right? And that is a form of activism, and it is something that is beneficial, absolutely. So yeah, no easy answer, obviously, but Okay, so I think we've reached time. Let's just dedicate. We can just do a heart dedicate. Yeah?
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm just going to jump in and do a quick Dana talk.
Oh, sure.
Less than a minute, just to remind folks that we really appreciate Lama Karma coming, and we really appreciate Natural Dharma Fellowship for hosting this. And if people would like to donate, Hilda will put the link in the chat. And thank you so much for your teaching.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for hosting. So let's do a dedication. That whatever benefit, whatever insight and understanding, whatever sense of connection, whatever goodness there's been, may that be specifically dedicated to alleviating the suffering of beings on this planet at this time, from sickness, from disease, from war. And that further may it be a cause for the full awakening of all beings, for our own awakening and that of all beings, to the furthest extent of space. So just offering that in that way. Okay. Alright, thank you everyone. So I guess I'll be back in 2 weeks, something like that.
If your
Yes.
horse doesn't run away.
Yeah.